Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome everyone to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. My whole life, no matter how hard I try, I seem to fall short. It has made me so afraid to try anything new. How can I get rid of this fear of failure? So this is a really deep and powerful dilemma. The idea that I fall short in whatever I try to do is a very damaging self-perception. Because what it means is, in my mind, in my perception of myself, I'm not good enough. I'm not the right person. I'm not smart enough. I'm not clever, blessed, talented, strong, creative. Whatever we're looking to be more of. If I feel like I'm not enough of that, and that whatever I do, I fail, this is a very, very damaging self-perception. And I can guarantee, even though I don't know who asked the question, I can guarantee that it's also not true. But that nonetheless, to carry that idea damages us before we even start anything. So the fear of failure, the question asked, how do I overcome a fear of failure? Well, the only way to overcome that, first of all, is to realize that I am not the results of my endeavors, right? So most of us judge ourselves by the results of our endeavors. I put together a project proposal. I take it to the boss. He or she thinks it's utterly useless. Means I'm stupid, means I'm a failure. I write a book. I can't get anybody to publish it. No publisher will take it. I finally self-publish it. Nobody buys it. I'm a failure. I take some money. I invest it in the stock market so that I can try to, make a better life for myself. I invest in all the wrong stocks, lose everything. I'm a failure. Well, these are endeavors. And in every single case, the outcome is something out of our control. So I did a beautiful project proposal, but the boss didn't like it. Well, remember, bosses are humans, which means they are subjective. They've got certain tastes, likes, dislikes, certain visions and agendas for where they're going that day, that week, that year. They've also got moods. that get impacted by their own family, who they had a fight with that day, how they're feeling about themselves. So the boss throwing out my proposal has a lot more to do with the boss's own subjective ideas than the validity of my proposal. Ask any entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, like how many ideas they had that quote unquote failed, as in nobody would buy them, they couldn't get it to move, before they actually had something that took off. It's always lots. Then you think about the book example. Well, as someone who just published a book that by God's grace did do very well, there is a lot more to book writing than book writing. The writing is actually the easy part and the enjoyable part. The rest of it, the marketing, the advertising, that stuff is like pulling teeth. It requires an entire skill set that has nothing to do with your ability as a writer, which is why you've got to have entire teams around all of that, because typically people who are writers are not necessarily very good marketers. So to have written a book that you sent off to publishers who rejected it, and then you self-published and thought that you would be able to sell it, it doesn't say anything about the quality of your book. It just says that in today's day and age, you didn't have the machinery that was needed around getting that book into the world. For a book to be a success, enough people have to actually see it and read it for word of mouth to be able to start to happen. And that takes a whole different machine. It has nothing to do with the quality of your book. Take the stock market, right? We all know it's a gamble. It's, flipping a coin, you at least know 50% of the time you're going to get it right, assuming you always chose the same thing. You could get it wrong 100% of the time if you kept going back and forth between choosing heads and tails, but if you were strategic, you would always choose heads or always choose tails, knowing that at least half the time you'd be right. But in the stock market, you could lose all of your money all the time. So these are just 3 randomly chosen examples, but every one of them is something where the success is completely out of your hands and has almost nothing to do with the quality of what you've created. But if in your mind you fall short, that is a dangerous statement and belief, because what that means is not, oh, I guess it's not in line with my boss's 2022 plan, or I guess she had a big fight with her husband today. But it's, I'm stupid, I'm wrong, I'm not good enough, I don't get it, I'm a failure. And this is the worst kind of thinking you can have. So fear of failure comes from this belief that I am the result of my endeavors, and that when my endeavors don't have the outcome I wanted, it doesn't just mean that the stock market crashed or that I, lost the toss of the dice. But it means I came up short. I was not good enough. I should have somehow had some kind of magical power to play it better. So fear of failure is rooted in this idea that the failure means I'm a failure. And it doesn't. One of the most critical and powerful lessons, if you want to be deeply happy, peaceful, fulfilled in your life, is you've got to separate, you have to unhook the outcome of your endeavors from your value as a human being. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. There's a million reasons endeavors might fail. One of my favorite personal examples is the story of how when I moved from Palo Alto, where we were actually living in a house with a backyard, into San Francisco, where we were living in an apartment, we brought our cat with us from Palo Alto to San Francisco, and the cat was an indoor-outdoor cat. Now, with a backyard, he had a lot of place to roam around. In San Francisco, there wasn't really anywhere to go, but he would wander out onto wasn't really a balcony, it was more like a landing of stairs that went down to the apartment down below. But we had some potted plants on the windowsill. I love to cook, and I was growing, basil and I think maybe oregano, things like that, in the pots on the window. And they wouldn't grow. They just wouldn't grow. I kept replanting them, getting new seeds, getting new soil. And it made no sense to me. I had done really well with my potted plants in Palo Alto. I mean, I never had much of a green thumb, but it doesn't take a lot to get basil to grow. And suddenly I can't even get it to sprout. And I'm looking over and our neighbors have got all kinds of things growing, so it's not the weather. And I start to feel like, God, something's, not quite right. And you think how small of a thing like your pot of basil, nonetheless, how it impacts our own self-esteem. And I started to really feel like, God, what is wrong with me? Like, have my fingers become, bad, that somehow the seeds, the soil, I'm doing it, what's wrong? So one day I come home early from school. I was in a Ph.D. program at the time, and I come home early, and the cat is in the pots, tossing all of the dirt from the pots over the sides into the little kind of mini backyard that we had. It wasn't really a backyard, but a little landing sort of thing. And I laughed because I realized, well, obviously I never could have thought of this. It never occurred to me our cat was the reason. But how many things in life have an explanation for not going right, as simple as that? But if I hadn't come home from school early that day, I never would have known, because the cat was always inside by late evening when I came home. So I didn't realize that he spent his days hanging out in my potted plants. So there's so many reasons that things don't go our way. And this is why in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagwan Krishna emphasizes so much. Don't be attached to the fruit of your actions. Do your best. But don't be attached, because you have no idea why. Something's going to sprout, something's going to grow, and something isn't. So you have to unhook your feeling about yourself from the success of your endeavors. However, if you really find that nothing you are doing is working, it might be an interesting exercise to ask yourself whether are you doing things that are really in alignment with your dharma, your inner drive? Or are you doing things just because this is what the culture or society or your parents think you should be doing? And that inside you, there's this unconscious rebel that's sabotaging everything you do because that inner rebel doesn't want to be the engineer or the doctor or the business person. That inner being wants to be a musician or an artist or a monk or a kindergarten teacher. But the society has said, no, they don't make any money. How will you support yourself? That's not a success. You must do this. It's what your brothers do, your sisters do. It's what everybody does. So it's always interesting to look within and see, might there be some unconscious, subconscious aspect of us that's pushing us to fail so that we actually have an excuse to not do this thing anymore? So look at that. And as far as fear of failure, realize that the only failure to be worried about is the failure to live your life. That's the only failure that matters. At the end of their life, nobody is going back thinking, oh God, I can't believe that business proposal didn't work. I can't believe that invention I created, that I wasn't a successful entrepreneur. People don't think like that. Oh, I can't believe that time the stock market crashed on me. When we're lying on our deathbed, what people are thinking about is the opportunity to live their lives in love, in truth, in divine connection that they've passed up on. So don't allow your fear of outcome of endeavors to keep you from living your life. Be afraid not to live your life. And live it with courage. Some things will work, some things won't. But what matters is that you are living your dharma, your calling. It's the only success or failure that matters.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by Rain and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me.
We need to have, obviously, gender equality. Now, you spoke on a quantum level, and we'll come there, but let's the moment stay on a very physical level. And the reason is we can't necessarily expect our societies and communities and cultures to work on quantum levels. It would be wonderful. I would love to get everybody working on that level. But in the meantime, what we've got is physical levels of existence. On the physical level of existence, there needs to be gender equality. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't certain things that, in general, making generalizations, women tend to be better at, more inclined toward, and things that some men tend to be better at, more inclined toward. For example, growing up in California, American football, not soccer, not what you call football here, but American football, tended to be something that a lot more men were interested in than women, for whatever reason. Women were allowed. There were women's teams, but not nearly as many as there were men's teams. I knew a lot of girls who were athletes. We all were into some kind of sports. I didn't know one girl growing up who was interested in football. Something might have to do with the fact that it really has to do with like a lot of hardcore, headbutting and wrestling and throwing each other all over the ground and whatnot. Now, I give that as a really superficial example because equal doesn't mean same. And one of the great challenges of the women's movement, of the feminist movement over the last many, many, many decades, is it got derailed for a while. It's gotten much better, but when it first took off, what you saw were women who believed that in order to be equal, they needed to be men. So they started, business attire became suits, whether you were a woman or a man. That the women were sort of dressing like men in the office place in order to guarantee their equality. That they were modeling their leadership styles on the masculine styles in order to demonstrate that they were equal. Well, women have a lot of very unique and very special gifts. And of course we're equal. And in order to be equal, we don't have to be the same. And so fortunately, over the last many, many years, that has shifted in America. And I mention it because as I've watched women's movements in India happen, I'm seeing, sadly, some of those aspects that we saw in America several decades ago of women being expected and expecting of themselves to be like men in order to have equal status. We should not have to mimic men in order to have equality. And it's critical to realize that equal does not mean same. We are different. And we are equal. Now, coming to the Vedas, there's a lot of misconceptions around religious hierarchy. It's true in Hinduism. It's true in every religion that I've ever experienced, learned anything about, or know people who are part of. Women in religion, and I say this to you as a woman in religion, struggle. Because the world of religion is still a man's world. And what that means is that as women, we have a very unique and very special role, I think, to play. Because God certainly doesn't discriminate. In fact, if you look at the scriptures are rooted in equality and love of women. I mean, we just finished 9 days of worship of women. To say, I will worship a woman, but I won't teach her, is kind of nonsense bordering on real lack of any kind of awareness at all. But this is what you see. And this is why, as women in religion, whether as actual, robed monastics or lay women in religion, either way, to realize we have a very beautiful and very special role to play. And we must play it. Not just for ourselves, but to help other women and girls know religion is a place for you as well. And so for someone to tell you, I don't feel comfortable teaching the Vedas to a woman, is a tragedy. Especially since this is actually a place, specifically at Parmarth, where we teach the Vedas to the students of every caste. So traditionally in most gurukuls that you would go to in India, they would be teaching them to only Brahmins. We teach kids of every caste. We bring in children of every caste into the Gurukul. They all get a sacred thread. They all read Vedas. Because Puja Swamiji says they're children of Ganga. They have no caste. Once they're here on the banks of Ganga, there is no caste. They're children of Ganga. And on a purely human level, he says, look, how do you tell one child they can study Vedas and another that they can't? Like, what kind of person could even do that? And so we never have. He also, by the way, this is going back to the 1980s, in America, in the Hindu Jain temple that he founded, gave sacred thread ceremonies to girls. Unheard of at that time. But, in America, where there isn't nearly as much segregation, there were little girls whose brothers were getting sacred thread ceremonies, and who came to him and said, can I have one? And he said, of course. I mean, of course. So he actually started this beautiful pattern of giving sacred thread ceremonies to girls. So it's a tragedy that someone said that to you. Do not take it as a statement about you or a statement about women. Take it as a statement about the person who said that to you. Because what it means is that their vision is very narrow and very stuck. And so have compassion for someone whose vision is so stuck in that way. And stay committed to learn the Vedas. Now, 2 days obviously is not the amount of time that one can possibly learn Vedas in Sanskrit. But take out some time. Come. We're actually in the midst of starting a whole new institute of yoga, of wellness, and of Vedic studies, which obviously it goes without saying will be open to every caste, every gender. So yeah, that's part of our this year plan. So we'll be able to offer an actual course in that, not just, some random person teaching you for 2 days. But stay committed, because women in religion, as I said, are needed. In the world of religion in general, because we bring a whole different touch to it, a whole different energy to it. But also to reflect to other women and girls that yes, there's a place for you in the world of religion. In fact, lastly, whenever we have big events, including Puja Swamiji's 70th birthday celebration that we'll be having the first week of June, whenever we have big events that we bring in special priests to come in and conduct special ceremonies, we always bring girls. There are some temples and gurukuls, particularly in the south, that are doing wonderful work training young girls in the Vedas, and we always bring them. So if you're here in June, you'll see all of the pujas and yagnas being conducted by a group of beautiful young girls leading them. So it's happening, but it's happening really slowly. And we need to do everything we can to help it happen in the right way, but ideally a little bit faster.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation.
Seeking evolution and seeking self-realization. So when I think of evolution, I think of something that happens collectively, the benefit of which are going to impact those after we are gone. So if we, through our meditative practice, through our practice of inquiry, through our practice of service, we change not just our actions, but the very makeup of our brain changes. There's a lot of science that actually shows that meditation literally changes your brain. Structurally, I mean, they've shown on a very basic level, the frontal lobe, especially the prefrontal cortex, actually gets thicker. Meaning that the connections, that you're actually making more and more connections. That area of the brain is changing. And other areas as well, but that's a very easy to measure scientifically one. And what we know about evolution is that we pass it down. We pass it down. And so when I think of working for evolution, I think about the future of the species. And so, for example, if we keep moving in this direction of individualism, it's all about me. I should have as much as I can get, whether I need to grab, lie, steal, harm, step on other people's heads, oppress them, repress them, abuse them. If we keep moving in that direction, we're destroying our planet. You know, different scientists will give you different estimates, but it's really kind of anywhere between about 90 years and a few hundred years, in which we no longer will be able to inhabit planet Earth. We're just going to push the environment to a place where it's too hot. The ice caps have melted. The oceans have risen. They have wiped away so many of the cities that we've got hundreds of millions of refugees with no place to go, that there isn't enough drinking water, that we've polluted our air, that we've decimated our forests, that we're going to get to a place where planet Earth is just not inhabitable for human beings. And so when I think of spiritual evolution, I think we today, what we are doing is that which we are going to pass on. Now, the easiest way of evolution is we pass it on in our genes. But that's not the only way that things get passed on. You pass things on by impacting them. I mean, yes, some people have to be the ones who are producing babies, or evolution just doesn't happen at all. But it's not that everyone, that it has to come through them. And so that, for example, if you attain self-realization past your childbearing years, that it's not really worthwhile. I don't think that's the case. I think that if you share and teach and impact others, that ripple impact is such that then those who are in their childbearing years are going to give birth, they're going to raise children in different ways. I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing it. The generations now, I mean, I'm seeing children of my friends, or children of people who are, you know, not a full generation beneath me, but maybe half a generation. Children of those who are mid-30s, 40. And these children are being raised differently, even in the face of technology. They're being raised with an awareness of themselves because they're being raised by people who are self-aware. They're being raised by people who, yeah, they're still human, but they're in touch enough with their own issues that they're not trying to make their children live their lives. They're not taking out all of their stuff on their kids. They're not filling their kids with fear and indoctrination. Oh my God, if the neighbors don't like you, you're going to die. Like, you better dress the right way, or oh my God, they're not going to like you. We're really, I think, giving birth to a generation of youth who are being encouraged to really find themselves. I mean, we're seeing it just, for example, much more in the West, of course, than here, but I think eventually it'll come, issues around gender identity, gender fluidity. I mean, no one, when I was growing up, could have even conceived of the idea that they had an option, that there was a choice. You know, and the closest you got was tomboy. But the idea that I actually get to really create my entire life journey, how I move through the world, from the very most basic level of what gender I want to be, or feel like being, or identify as, to what I want to do, to what I want to study. And I think our economy is really supporting it, because if you look back over the last long time, you take anybody, say 60 and over, their themselves, their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, there were really a limited number of professions, right? People were doctors, they were teachers, they were lawyers, they were trash collectors, they were artisans, artists of some sort. They were housewives. There were buckets or boxes of professions. As a woman, maybe you had 10 options to choose from. As a man, maybe you had 20 options to choose from. But today, with the tech boom and what it's done, people are becoming millionaires every day in jobs that didn't even exist when I was in college. And so the economy is actually supporting this, because no longer do you have to get this degree, get this job, move your way up through the ranks, the way that people have had to do for hundreds of years. Suddenly, college dropouts in their garage tend to be the majority of those who are kind of running the world these days. You look at all the tech companies. It's like, yeah, I was a dropout of here, dropout of there, in my garage, in the back of my car. And it's beautiful, because it's really creating this possibility for us to actually make a living in a way that's in alignment with how I identify. I mean, it used to be, okay, you're an artist. Well, if no gallery is going to give you a show, nobody's going to know about your work, you'll never be able to sell it, you'll starve, you better become a waiter instead. Well, today you go online, you make your own site on any one of all of these sites where people sell things. You create a bunch of, viral videos online, and your artwork sells. Now, obviously, this isn't true for everyone, but the possibility is there. And so I'm very excited about our spiritual evolution in that way, because it can only work if the economy supports it. If nobody can make a living being spiritually evolved, we're not going to be able to go very far. But so many people now, teaching, writing, singing, making music, writing poetry, or being the ones engaged with those who are teaching, writing, running centers, running websites, printing books, running social media, running whatever it is. There's such a new world that has opened up. So spiritual evolution, I think, is something collective. Each of us has the responsibility to be part of that collective. Doesn't mean that you have to be gender fluid. It doesn't mean that you have to have a very obscure type of brand new techie profession. But it just means that each of us is, I think, required to question ourselves, to introspect, to contemplate, to ask, who am I? Who am I? No, I'm not the one whose hair is this, who wears this type of jewelry, this type of clothes. That's not me. I was looking when I was in America a few months ago. So at some people's house, and they had these old magazines from 1959 and 1963, one from 59, one from 63. They were the old big Life magazines in America. And I was going through, and of course the articles were very interesting, like what was news at that time. But even more than the articles, the advertisements were so interesting, because it was all about this objectification. Women were those, all the advertisements were like ways to look beautiful when your husband comes home from work. Right? Like, are you sweaty from vacuuming all day long? Well, if you just have this, you will be fresh like you've had a shower in time for your husband to come home. It was just, it was this incredible experience of laughing, also kind of crying for them, but also feeling so deeply grateful that that's no longer the world that we live in. The number of appliances they were selling where the sole way to sell them was that they didn't break your fingernails. The iron that you could use that had a handle that actually didn't put pressure on your fingernails when you squeezed so that you wouldn't chip the nail. And the woman with the broken nail, and oh my God, my old iron broke my nail. And the new iron. It was amazing. It was the stuff that everyone would boycott your products if you even had the audacity to come up with a design like this, even if you never published it. If it leaked in your office that you so much as even suggested that an iron should be sold because it didn't break the housewife's fingernail. Right? So we are actually coming a long way in what you can think of as cultural evolution. But cultural evolution is creating this space now, I think, for independent thought. And independent thought is required for spiritual evolution. I have to be able to ask and answer honestly, who am I? And to trust that answer in order to evolve spiritually. And I think we're there. I think we're at a place now where that space has been created for people to have the freedom to ask the questions, to have whatever answer percolates through them, to allow it to be there, and to be able to have the courage and the space to move through their world. To recognize we are not slaves to algorithms. We are not slaves to marketing and advertising, or to big business, or to big pharma, or to politics. I think all of the movements these days, as strongly in favor of vaccines as I personally happen to be, I think the movement of skepticism and cynicism around the vaccine was actually a very, very healthy conversation. Because it created this idea that, wow, just because Big Pharma says it doesn't necessarily mean I need to buy it. And all of this creates that space for us to really dive into, okay, so then, who do I trust? What do I trust? What is my way of knowing? If my way of knowing is not the advertisement I see, how do I know? And then we go back in and we dive in and we listen. So I think each of us is called to do that today. I think it is our social responsibility to our spiritual evolution as a society. And the more of us who do that, the more the impact ripples out, whether you are actually bearing children or not. Because it's also an energy. Meditation is an energy. Prayer is an energy. Service, surrender is an energy. And that energy goes out. Self-realization is a personal experience. Yes, obviously, when I am self-realized, when I am self-realized, I'm going to share that energy. I'm going to share love. I'm going to share truth. My very being becomes a space in which others can also dive into the truth of themselves. But I think of self-realization more as a personal responsibility, and spiritual evolution more as our collective responsibility. And of course they go together, because if I'm going to be part of spiritual evolution, well, I have to be on a path of self-realization. Otherwise, what am I giving to that evolution? What is my value add? What am I sharing? If I'm not on a spiritual path, realizing myself and God more and more every day, then I'm not contributing to that shift in our society, in our world. So they go together. But I think one is more your responsibility to yourself, and the other is the responsibility to the world.
This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.